Recording in progress.
Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namashri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padavadime Tayosritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak pranas chakshusrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahmopanishadam maham brahma nirakuriyam ma brahma nirakarot anirakaranamaspanirakararam mestu tadatmani nirate yavupanishatsu dharmaste mai santu.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
We are starting a second webinar series on Swami Vivekananda's contribution to yoga and the pioneering work that he did more than 125 years ago for the propagation of yoga, particularly in the Western world. Swami Vivekananda, as you know, was one of the greatest yogis of all times. Sri Ramakrishna spoke of him as Jnana Siddha. Jnana Siddha means a person who is adept in meditation. The Puranic lore has it that 7 great rishis were meditating, the Sapta Rishi Mandala, and Vyasa, the great sire and the Sarvagya omniscient sage, who is the father of all that we now call the Bharatiya Jnana Sampradaya or Parampara, the great Indian spiritual heritage, created 2 immortal characters in this Purana called the Nara Narayana. Narayana, the Supreme Lord, the infinite and the absolute, as it were, divided himself into 2 halves. The infinite and the indivisible can't be divided, but it's only a conception, a bhavana, a way of expression, and put them to eternal penance, tapasya in the Badarika ashram, the Himalayas, for the good of humanity. And the Lord has it that the Nara Narayana incarnate themselves age after age as avatars for dharma samsthapana, for resuscitation and rejuvenation of the eternal religion, dharma. When the Lord came as Sri Krishna and taught the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was an Nara Rishi, representative man. When he came as Sri Ramachandra, Hanuman Mahavir was a Nara Rishi. When he came as Jesus, we may say, the Nara Rishi was Saint Peter. When he came as Buddha, the Nara Rishi was Ananda. When he came as Sri Chaitanya, the Nara Rishi was Nityananda Mahaprabhu. And this age, we believe that he came as Sri Ramakrishna and the Nara Rishi was Swami Vivekananda. We have it in the testimony of Ramakrishna himself when Naren first met Sri Ramakrishna Dakshineshwar. With folded hands, he prayed to him, Jani Prabhu, Vishay Puratan Shanatan Nara Rishi Narayan, Jagade Kundane Kundana, Sharira Dharan Kore Eshecho. I know, O Lord, you are that ancient Nara Rishi who has now assumed this human form for the good of humanity. He also said he is one of the Sapta Rishis, 7 great stages. Ramakrishna described one of his visions as follows. His mind was soaring high and higher and higher. Ultimately, he crossed the limits of all the regions in the manifested world, the greater Prapancha. Went farther up, the Devi Loka, where all the Devatas and Devis were residing, went still farther up, and where the mind and speech could not reach, the realm of the indivisible, there he saw 7 rishis were meditating in silence, absorbed in samadhi. He says, my mind was wonderstruck at what kind of tapasya, penance, what kind of austerity, spiritual practices, what kind of purity these sages must be possessing to be able to come to the highest pinnacle of all the spiritual regions. When he was thinking thus, he says, a portion of the powerful luminosity that is enveloping the entire space there, which is Chidakasha, the consciousness space. The luminosity condensed in the form of a small child, and that child came near one of the sages and gently putting its arms around this sage, in the sweetest voice of a child, told that sage, I am going, you too should come. Ami jatchi, tomakeo jete habe. At the touch of this gentle, sweet, wonderful, divine child, the sage opened his eyes, looked at this child with greatest affection and love, as if they have known each other for ages, millennia, age after age, and smiling assent, again got absorbed in samadhi. When Narendranath came down to the earth and Ramakrishna saw him for the first time, he said, Narendra is that sage, is a Sapta Rishi. And later he said that child was he himself, Ramakrishna himself. And Ramakrishna commissioned Narendra to teach people. When he was desperately ill at Kashipur Garden House in Calcutta with throat cancer, just a few days before he passed away, he wrote on a piece of paper with great difficulty, Noren Shikha Debe, Hore Baire Hag Debe. Naren will teach people and he will call people, hearken people near and far and teach them the secret of spirituality. And he trained Narendra for this purpose. Swami Vivekananda later said, I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. What was his message for the West? The crux, the kernel, the core of his message is the synthesis of the four yogas, which is the main theme of the webinar series which are beginning today. This is an inaugural talk, and it will be followed by Jnana Yoga, tomorrow by Swami Sarvapriyananda, who is the minister in charge of the New York Vedanta Society. The first center started by Swami Vivekananda in 1895. That will be followed by a talk on Bhakti Yoga by Swami Atmashraddhananda with the secretary of our Kanpur Ramakrishna Ashram. Then we'll follow a talk on Raja Yoga by Swami Kaleshananda, who is the controller of examination of this university, himself a practicing yogi. And then we'll have 3 talks on Swami Vivekananda's Bhakti Yoga, discussing the light of Christian mystics' love of God, a very unique approach by one of our research PhD scholars, Sriti Rani Saha, a female scholar, and followed by another talk, Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, vis-a-vis Western philosophical thoughts, particularly the duty for duty's sake, as discussed by Immanuel Kant and Bradley. The last concluding talk in the series will be on the International Day of Yoga, 21st of June, 2022, by Dr. Aromita Roy, who is the Swami Abhedananda chair holder at this university, herself a very accomplished philosopher and a practitioner of yoga. So Swami Vivekananda struggled with Western thought. And he said, it is not easy to preach Vedantic ideas, Hindu ideas into English. There is a remarkable statement made by him in one of the letters to his dear Madras disciple Alasinga Perumal, in which he says, to put the Hindu ideas into English and then make out of dry philosophy, intricate mythology, and pure startling psychology, a religion which shall be easy, simple, popular, and at the same time meet the requirement of the highest minds is a task only those can understand who have attempted it. The dry, abstract Advaita must become living, poetic in everyday life. Out of the hopelessly intricate mythology must come concrete moral forms. And out of bewildering yogism must come the most scientific and practical psychology. All this must be put in a form so that a child may grasp it. That is my life's work. So this is a wonderful statement by Swami Vivekananda. What was the difficult task he set upon to accomplish? He was a pioneer in bringing in ancient wisdom to the modern world and in bridging ancient spiritual wisdom and modern scientific knowledge. And the result of his teaching, particularly the 4 yogas, which form the core of his teaching, was that this great awakening in the East and the West about the practice of these 4 yogas in the modern way. These yogas were well known. The Bhagavad Gita was the greatest example of the Samanvaya yoga. Bhagavan Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, teaching Arjuna who was depressed. Remember, Arjuna is representative of mankind, all of us. Every one of us is Arjuna facing depression, confusion, complete helplessness, and lifting our hearts in prayer and surrendering to divine, asking for divine help and intervention. Karpanya dosho apahatasvabhava prachhamitvam dharma sammudha chetaha yachreyasnan nistitam bruhitan me sishyastenam shadi mam prapannam. Beginning of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna collapses completely and says, Karpanya dosho apahatasvabhava, I am completely helpless. I do not know what to do. And I'm confused about dharma and adharma, what is to be done, what is not to be done. Prichhamitvam, I'm asking you, dharma sammudha chetaha. I'm completely confused. I'm deluded about dharma and adharma. Please tell me what is important for me. Yat shreyasyan nischitam me bruhi. Please tell me clearly what is important for me. I am your disciple. I am your devotee. Shishyaste shadhi. Please instruct me. Who am I? Mam prapannam. I'm completely surrendered to you. This is a cry which goes up from every human heart, particularly for the last couple of years when we face this terrible, devastating pandemic due to COVID-19. The whole world was crying. People were lifting their hearts in prayer if they had faith in God. And those who did not have faith in God were almost going mad. So much of devastation, so much of agony, so much of panic, so much of conflict. The present world, which is conflict-ridden, panic-stricken, and full of misery, requires this message of the yoga, which is integration. Swami Vivekananda integrated the four yogas, and later on, Sri Aurobindo, Rishi Aurobindo, following in Swami Vivekananda's footsteps, taught the integral yoga. The modern age is an age of synthesis and harmony. The modern age is the age of integration. The modern age is one of bringing together all the possible apparently contradictory elements and fusing them into a sweet harmony. Swami Vivekananda therefore said, science and religion will meet and shake hands. Poetry and philosophy will become friends. This will be the religion of the future, and if we can work it out, we may be sure that it will be for all times and all peoples. This is the only way, this is the one way that will prove acceptable to modern science for almost come to it. No distinction between science and religion, between spirituality and the modern technology, no distinction between secular and the sacred, the householder and the sannyasin, between outward exploration of this universe of physical science and the inner exploration of spirituality and consciousness of the spiritual science. There will be complete harmony between these two, and Swami Vivekananda predicted, prophesied that this will be the religion of the future and is the one way that will prove acceptable to modern science. And in another letter written to E.T. 30 in February 1896, the previous letter, Alasinga Perumal, in which he talked about his life's work, almost around the same time, he wrote to E.T. 30, his dear English disciple, about how he wanted to integrate and synthesize the four yogas: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raja Yoga. He says very humorously, I want to give them means the Westerners, dry, hard reason, softened in the sweetest syrup of love, made spicy with intense work, and cooked in the kitchen of yoga so that even a baby can easily digest it. A wonderful, sweet way of putting it. Hard, dry reason, Jnana Yoga, penetrating intellect, not only the intellect of the brain, but the higher intelligence of the heart. We should remember, whenever jnana or knowledge is mentioned in the context of spiritual wisdom of India and the East, it means not the intellect of the brain, but the higher intuitive intelligence of the heart. Not this ordinary emotional heart, but the spiritual heart. The three kinds of heart, Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika, and Adhyatmika. One is the physical heart, which the cardiologist, doctors deal with. The second is the emotional heart, which is the prana, emotion, feeling. And the third is the spiritual heart, which is called the Hridaya Guha in the Upanishads, the cave of the heart. Hridaya Akasha, the space of the heart. Dahara Akasha, Hridaya Akasha, Hridaya Guha. These are the various terms used to describe the heart. And this spiritual heart is the seat of jnana, divine, supreme, intuitive intelligence and wisdom. When the awakening of the spiritual heart takes place, which corresponds to Vijnanamaya Atma. The Taittiriya Upanishad speaks of the 5-layered human personality. The Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. These are 5-layered human personality. Annamaya is the physical. Pranamaya is emotional, vital. Manomaya is the mental, self. Vijnanamaya is the higher, intuitive intelligence self. And Anandamaya is the bliss self, which is beyond ordinary or even spiritual intelligence. So there's a 5-layered human personality, and the awakening of the heart corresponds to the heart called the Vijnanamaya. From the paradigm of the chakras, the 6 spiritual centers, where Tantra speaks about the Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, Agya, and Sahasrara. Sahasrara is the 7th, which is beyond the Shat Chakra, corresponding to the Anahata, which is the Vijnanamaya, is a special lotus-like spiritual heart. When it is awakened, you can intuit spiritual truths. This awakened, intuitive, higher intelligence, which happens when the awakening of the spiritual heart takes place in the Anahata, the Vijnanamaya, Atman, then you are endowed with a spiritual intelligence, which is called by various names. Medha is the word used in the Medha Sutram in the Vedas. Prajna is the word used in the Yoga Sutras. Ritambhara Prajna. Prajna which is filled with truth. For the first time, you realize the truths of your spiritual nature. You realize you are not this physical, emotional entity, psychological entity. You are a self, a spirit, Atman, separate from and different from the body-mind complex in which you are encased. The body and the mind are only houses in which you live. The Kathopanishad gives the Ratha Rupa Kalpana. The Atman is the Rathi who is sitting in this chariot, Ratha. And the body-mind complex is the Ratha in which the Rathi, the Atman, is sitting. And the Buddhi is the driver, the charioteer. And the Indriyas are the various horses which are driving the chariot. A beautiful example given in the Kathopanishad. Atmanam rathinam vidhi, shariram rathamevatu, buddhim saratham vidhi, manapragrahamevacha, indriyani hayanahu, vishayasteshu gocharan, atmendriyamano yuktam bhokte tahuru manishana. This is the wonderful paradigm they talk about. So this is a prajna, this is called medha, and it's also called the dhi. Dhi is the term used in the Gayatri Mantra. Most of us know the Gayatri Mantra. This is the prayer for the awakening of this higher intelligence called the dhi. Dhiyo yo na prachodayat. Dhiya is the plural form of dhi. Naha asmakam, all of us. May he, the Supreme Being, symbolized by the luminous sun, adorable, awaken the higher spiritual intelligence of all of us. Om tat savidur varenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi dhyo yo na prachodayat. Om Gayatri Mantra, well known, everybody chants it and knows it now. So there's a dhi in the Gayatri, in the Vedanta and the Vedas, the Medha in the Medha Suktam in the Vedas, the Prajna in the Yoga Sutras, all of them almost mean the same thing. And they correspond to the Vijnanamaya Atman and the Anahata Chakra. You see a mysterious, uncreated light accompanied by a mysterious, unstruck sound called the Anahata Dhvani, which is Om. These are all highly mystic experiences which are real, experienceable by all of us through purity, control of senses, meditation, concentration, inwardness. So this is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is not merely intellect of the brain, it is the intelligence, higher, awakened, spiritual intelligence called the Medha, Prajna, or the Dhi. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga by which the individual self longs to attain the Supreme Paramatman. Before we take on the Bhakti Yoga, we'll talk about some Upanishadic passages which describe the Bhakti Yoga in dramatic terms. Jnana Yoga, the Upanishadic wisdom, the quest for unity and oneness. All this will be possible only after your higher self has been awakened. Remember that. One is quest for unity. Eka vijnanena sarvam vijnanam. Tasmin bhagavo vijnane sarvamidam vijnatam bhavaditi. Chandagya and Mundaka. This is called Ekatva Vijnana. Ekena Sarvam Vijnatam Syat. Chandagya. Just by knowing one lump of clay, I know the entire clay world, all the objects created by clay. By knowing gold, I can understand the nature of all the golden ornaments and golden objects. By knowing clay, I can understand all the objects made of clay. Vacharambhanam vicharo nam vikaro nam adeyam mrittigetyeva satyam. Only the Nama Rupa is different. You have a clay image of Durga, clay image of Lakshmi and Saraswati, clay image of Ganesha and Kartikeya during the Durga Puja. But all of them are only clay. When the whole thing is put in water on the day of Dashami, Visarjana, then simply melt and become clay and mix with the river. You can't distinguish it in the clay of the Durga image or the clay differentiated from the clay of the Lakshmi image or Saraswati image. Clay is clay. What makes the difference? Nama and Rupa. This is Jnana. Jnana Yoga says the whole world is only Nama Rupa Atmaka. You create a form and give it a name, and the whole objects become individuated, individualized, separated from the universe, as it were. But you are the universal. You separate yourself from the universal by imagining, I have a body, I have a name, I have a form. If we remove the Nama Rupa, the whole thing is only Chidananda. Astibhati Priyam Rupam, Nama Rupam cha Panchakam, Adyatrayam Brahma Rupam, Jagat Rupam Tatodvayam. That's a beautiful shloka and Dridrisha Viveka of Shankaracharya. The whole thing can be described, this world and the next world, spiritual world, the material world, by just 5 things. Asti, Bhati, Priya, which is equivalent to Sat Chidananda, and Nama Rupa. The first 3, Asti Bhati Priya, Satchidananda is the Brahma Swarupa, the supreme spiritual entity. The last 2, Nama Rupa, describes the Jagat of the world. So simple as that. So, Upanishadic rishis asked in Jnana Yoga, is it possible to know that one, Kasmin no Bhagavo Vigyate, Sarvamidam Vigyatam Bhavatiti, Mandaka Upanishad 113. What is that, O sir? By knowing which everything becomes known. Now the present quest in science, particularly in higher physics, it is TOE, theory of everything. Can I have a single theory which can explain everything? Albert Einstein was looking for what is called grand unification theories. And now the whole search and quest in science is GUTS, G-U-T-S, grand unification theories. Is it possible to have a grand unification theory which will explain all the phenomena in the entire world of relativity? And the quest for oneness. Microcosm and macrocosm, Vyashti and Samashti, are in dynamic equilibrium. This is a very vast subject. Science talks about dynamic equilibrium. Equilibrium is not static. There is a kind of equilibrium which is dynamic, and the Vyashti and Samashti, the individual and the collective, individual and the cosmic, the microcosmic and the macrocosmic are both on the same plane. Swami Vivekananda had a wonderful spiritual experience in Himalayas, in Almora, at a people tree, in which he saw the oneness of the microcosm and the macrocosm. And he wrote down in Bengali in his notebook, today, one of the greatest problems in my life has been solved. I have seen the oneness of the macrocosm and the microcosm. And he says very poetically, I have seen the entire universe in an atom. I am an individual, encased in individual body, mind, etc. And I am interacting with this universe, which is vast. And these two belong to the same reality. I am an individual counterpart, the Vyashti, of the entire reality, and this universe is a cosmic counterpart of the same reality. And the individual, the tiny of the tiniest, Anoraniyan, is the same as the largest of the largest, Mahato Mahiyan, which Kathopanishad talks about. And the second quest in the Jnana Yoga, the Upanishad, the wisdom, the quest for continuum of matter, life, mind, consciousness. And the quest for interconnectedness, which is oneness of existence. This is a very, very important idea in Jnana Yoga. Matter is what we know, what we see, what we experience. Einstein's special theory of relativity said space and time are not separate entities. You can't any longer talk about space and time. You have to speak about space-time continuum. Later on, the general theory of relativity extended it to space-time matter continuum. You can't isolate matter from space-time. In the presence of massive objects with a large amount of matter, space-time is curved. The curvature of space-time, which Einstein found was the cause of what you call gravitation, is a profound discovery of Einstein. So he found a continuum of space, time, matter, and Vedanta added life, mind, and consciousness. Life is not consciousness, according to Vedanta. Life corresponds to pranamaya, and consciousness begins at the time of Vijnanamaya. Manomaya is the mind, pranamaya is life, and Vijnanamaya is consciousness. So life, mind, consciousness is actually pranamaya, manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and matter is annamaya. So mind, life, matter, life, mind, consciousness is annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya. The higher realms of consciousness, anandamaya. This is one Atman. The Taittiriya Upanishad talks about annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, anandamaya, atma. This is one continuum. The beautiful word which is used in the Upanishad. Each one of these Atmans is overwhelmed and enveloped by the previous one. Tena isha purna. Isha tena purna. Tena by the previous one. This is completely purna, enveloped. It overlaps and it is otaprota. Interconnectedness, oneness of existence, which is called the solidarity of the universe, the idea comes from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The word used is so significant. Otaprota. Kasmin dakhalo, otas cheti. The question which is asked, Gargi is asking the question, Yajnavalkya, the great sage, is answering. What is that by which everything is otaprota enveloped? Step by step, see, what is that the highest truth is otaprota, that is the Akshara Brahman, the supreme, undecaying, indestructible, indivisible Brahman. Akshare sarvasyapi otaprota bhavaha. Shankara's commentary, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 387. Akshare, by this Akshara, indestructible, supreme, indivisible entity, sarvasya, all of them, otaprotaha. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. The Isha Vasya Upanishad says the entire universe of living and non-living beings should be enveloped and covered as otaprota, the supreme being. Then quest for the infinite. This is called Bhuma Vigyasa. Bhuma is that which is infinite. Yada Bhuma Vaitat Sukham, the Alpe Sukhamasti, Chandogya Upanishad. It says, Bhuma, the infinite, that alone is Sukha. Joy, real joy can be obtained only in the infinite. There can't be any joy in the finite. Why should a man seek God? Why should a man seek the infinite? Why should a man seek something imperishable and supreme? That is because none else will give you real joy. Only the infinite alone can give you real, true joy. Every joy, other joy is ephemeral. Bhumavaitat sukham, and Taittiriya Upanishad says, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. In Bhakti Yoga, Swamiji has some unique contributions. Swami Vivekananda talked about the triangle of love. This is a very, very peculiar idea of Swamiji. How in one simple imagery, he summarizes the entire idea of Bhakti Yoga. He says, love, Bhakti can be likened to a triangle. The first angle of a triangle of love is that love knows no bargaining. It is not a barter. I give something, I take something. Wherever there is any seeking for something in return, there can be no real love. It becomes a mere matter of shopkeeping. This triangle of love, the first important triangle, there's no bargaining in love. You don't say, I give something and in return I need something else. Even expectation of love in return is also not true, real love in the real sense. I just give and then it ends. Swamiji calls it shopkeeping. I open a shop of love, I give something and get something back in return. This is not real love. The second angle of the triangle of love is that love knows no fear. Those that love God through fear, the lowest of human beings, quite undeveloped as men. You can't fear God. God is your supreme object of your love. You don't fear Him. There can't be any fear in love because fear comes only when there is an idea of duality. Vidiyadvai bhayam bhavati. Only when there is two, there is fear. In true love, there is so much of unity and oneness. Even physically, people want to hug each other because they want to become one. The physical level, it is not possible. At the level of prana, emotions, it is not possible. At the level of the mind also, it is not possible. Only the highest spiritual level, it is possible to have oneness and unity. There can't be any fear in love. The third angle of the triangle of love is that love knows no rival, for it is always embodied in the lover's highest ideal. True love never comes until the object of our love becomes to us the highest ideal. This is extremely important to notice. The object of your love, suppose is God. God should be your highest ideal, and you don't choose anything else as better or less choosable. There is no choice there. It is a choiceless love. You love God. Why? After having chosen several things, I choose God to be better. No, there's no choice because God is your highest ideal, and therefore there is no other higher ideal than the highest. There is no two of which you choose one. I choose God because He is my highest. There is a remarkable verse in the Bhagavad Gita, the last verse of the 15th chapter, of the 11th chapter. Mat karmagrin mat paramo mad bhakta sangavarjuna nirvaira sarva bhuteshu yasya mameti pandava. Bhagavan Bhashyakara Shankara says, this shloka, this verse of the Bhagavad Gita, 1155, is the essence of not only the Gita, but all of the Vedas. Sarva Vedartha Sangraha Bhutam. It is so important. I like to think of the Panchashila of the Gita. The 5 Shilas. What are they? 5 values or 5 feelings. Mat Karma 1, Mat Paramo 2, Mad Bhakta 3, Sanghavarjita 4, Nirvaira Sarva Bhuteshu 5. Mat Karma Krit. A person who does my work. He works for me, he thinks of me as supreme and all his activities because of me. How? Karma Yoga is mixing with Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. See how all of them are interrelated so beautifully, mingling with each other. Mat Karma Krit is doing my work, Lord's work. Why? Mat Paramo, he thinks of me as the highest ideal. You take God to be the highest ideal of love, Mat Paramo, Mad Bhakta, and therefore he devoted to God alone. Sanghavarjita, there is no attachment to anything. You are not attached to the fruits of work, you are not attached to your personal ambition and likes and dislikes. Nirvaira sarva bhuteshu, you have no enmity, acrimony, ill will for anybody in this universe, any being at all. Why? Because all of them are manifestations of the same beloved God. These are the 5 great ideals. There, the special emphasis on Paramo. He is the supreme being. It's a triangle of love, which, although comes in the Bhakti Yoga, is very closely related to Jnana because there is oneness. Nobody else except God that you see. And there is also Karma Yoga where you work for God because He is your highest ideal. The Bhagavad Gita, the Lord talks about 4 kinds of devotees, bhaktas. Chaturvida bhajante maam janas sugritinor arto jigyasvarartharthi gani jabaratava. 4 kinds of people, devotees worship me. Those afflicted with misery, artha, jigyasu, those are curious to know, inquisitive people, artharthi, those who want material gain through me. Most of the people like us are like that. We give some gift to God and return something back. Artharthi. They are eager to get some material benefits from God. And the last and the greatest is Jnani, the great knowledgeable person, the greatest lover. Jnani is a great bhakta. The great Jnani is also a great bhakta. Great man of knowledge is also a great man of love. Tesham Jnani nityayuktaha ekabhaktir vasishyate. The next verse says, among them the Jnani is the greatest. Why? Nityayuktaha is always connected to me. Ekabhaktihi, one pointedly he is devoted to me. Look at this. Eka Bhakti. Who is he? Jnani. How Bhakti and Jnana mingle in this shloka. Shankaracharya is the great genius of a commentator, says, Nitya Yuktaha Eka Bhakti. Eka Bhakti, what does it mean? Anyasya bhajaniyasya adarshanaat Eka Bhakti. He does not find anything else worthy of being worshipped. And therefore, he is worshipping the Lord. He is devoted to the Lord, not because there is a choice between the Lord and something else, and he has chosen the Lord to worship. No. He just does not see anything else except the Lord, except God, who is worthy of any worship, of any bhakti. Here, Advaita is beautifully blended with bhakti. A bhakta, a true devotee, loves God because he just doesn't see anybody else except God who can be loved and worshipped. Since there is complete absence of duality, only God exists, he pours his heart's love to God. The Karma Yoga, Swamiji's unique contribution, the idea of work for work's sake. which is applicable to the modern world, even for a person with no faith in God or religion. We normally think working for God, offering all our foods to God. These are constantly being spoken about. Ishvara Aradhanartham, as worship of God. Ishvara Arpana Phalam, offering, surrendering all the fruits of work to God. These are considered the motive of work. Why do you work? Not because of fruits of work. I don't want anything. I do work because it is a command of God, because I love God, and I offer all the fruits of my work to God, and Ishvara Aradhana, as worship of God, Ishvara Prityartham, to please God. Your mother or father is very sick, and you are waking late in the night and serving them with great devotion and great feeling and love. What do you expect of them? Nothing. Because you love them. So to please them, and your father is happy, mother is happy, oh, how much you served me, that's the greatest satisfaction. Swami Vivekananda says, what about a person who doesn't believe in God or religion? He evolved a unique idea, what he called work for work's sake. After a couple of days, we will have a seminar in which one of our scholars will present the idea of work for work's sake, duties for duty's sake of Kant, and the Bradley's idea of how the idea of duties and duty's sake consummates in God, and ultimately it is love which comes in to grease the wheels of duty. So duty is seldom sweet. Only when the idea of love greases it becomes extremely easy and sweet. How the idea of karma yoga is brought into bhakti yoga and jnana yoga. Then Raja Yoga is a unique contribution of Swami Vivekananda to the science of yoga. He called it Raja Yoga, the royal path. The Bhagavad Gita talks about Raja Vidya, Raja Vidyam, the 9th chapter, but it's slightly different. Swami Vivekananda's unique contribution to science of yoga is Raja Yoga. By integrating the Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali, we know the Ashtanga Yoga, 8-limbed yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana Samadhi of Patanjali. By integrating this Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali with the conceptions of Sankhya and Tantra, Sankhya, the idea of Akasha and Prana, in the light of the creation of this universe, and the Kundalini Yoga, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, and the Shatchakras, all these conceptions are beautifully brought and integrated in the book on Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, which is Swami Vivekananda's great contribution. In fact, for a yogi, the modern world, Raja Yoga is the textbook. He gives the rationale of the ancient yoga system. What are the rational things? Suppose you don't believe in God, suppose you don't believe in religion, the purely psychological approach to yoga and in the higher realms of psychology, when the mind transcends itself, you realize certain extraordinary truths. And he explained to them in the light of modern science of physiology, anatomy, etc., known at that time. So many people, the physiologists and the doctors, became extremely interested in Swami Vivekananda's exposition of the Raja Yoga. Sir William James, at that time a very great psychologist and a philosopher, after seeing and discussing with Swami Vivekananda, he wrote a book, Varieties of Religious Experience. Swami Vivekananda said the various religious experience need not be analyzed in the light of devotion to God or a supernatural entity. They can be analyzed purely psychologically, and he added a wonderful word, yoga vocabulary. Conscious, unconscious, subconscious, these things were known thanks to Freud. But Swami Vivekananda added an extraordinarily important word to yoga psychology, which is super consciousness. And he said, there is nothing supernatural in this world. Everything is only natural in the higher realms. Because you do not know the laws of this super nature, we call it supernatural. It is natural. Provided you know the laws of this world, it becomes natural. We call it super conscious spiritual experience. What we call samadhi goes beyond the conscious. What we normally call conscious, Vedanta and yoga will call it unconscious. We are now talking, this webinar, all of you are listening from wherever you are. I am talking from here, from Vellore Much. We think we are conscious, we are talking, we are discussing, we are seeing the waking state. Vedanta says the state of waking is actually a state of sleep. We are unconscious. As long as we have not woken up to a higher consciousness, when Kundalini reaches the Anahata and the awakening of the higher intelligence of the Prajna, the Medha, the Thi, we are still the realm of the unconscious. Consciousness begins with the reaching of the Kundalini of the Anahata and the awakening of the Thi, the Prajna or the Medha. Beyond that you go and reach the Sahasrara, which corresponds to Anandamaya and beyond. Then you have the super conscious experience. Swami Vivekananda spoke about all this. Above all, bringing to bear his own spiritual realization on the entire exposition, Swami Vivekananda gave a remarkably modern rationale of the yoga system. Now, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, all of them, Swami Vivekananda said, should be harmoniously blended, synthesized in the modern world. Because there is an element of Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga in everybody. A person may be very intellectually oriented, but he also possesses emotions. He possesses extreme agility to perform action, and sometimes he wants to be very calm and meditative. Nobody can exclusively practice any of these, although the inclination may be slightly different. Somebody over much emotional, in the higher realms of emotion, when the emotion becomes purified, sublimated, divinized through its being directed towards God, he becomes a bhakti yogi. Somebody may be over much a bhakta, but he also participates in jnana yoga, karma yoga, and raja yoga. Some people may be very meditative. They want to be contemplative. They don't want to interact. They don't want to talk much. They don't want to eat unnecessarily. They're inward people, what we normally call introverts. Introversion is not something which is running away from the world. The higher levels of introversion is contemplation. Such a person also, keen understanding through jnana, emotion through bhakti, and action through karma. Swamiji made this ideal for all. This is ideal for everybody, synthesizing the four yogas with a particular slant towards one according to one's own temperament. And he also said, at the individual level, if you combine the four yogas, at the collective level, you can attempt religious harmony. This is a very unique subject, which is beyond the scope of this talk. It's an extraordinarily important subject which Swami Vivekananda hints at in his lectures. At the individual level, if we combine the proclivity of jnana, bhakti, karma, and yoga, jnana, at the collective level, you can harmonize and synthesize the various religions. As Buddhism, for example, is mainly contemplative and jnana oriented. In Hinduism, you have Vaishnavism, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so on, which is bhakti oriented. Christianity is largely bhakti oriented. Islam talks about God, surrender to God, thinking of God. Karma Yoga is emphasized in Sikhism, Seva and Nama Japa, bhakti and karma combined. Raja Yoga is emphasized in Buddhism, for example, and many of the higher mystical endeavors of the Christian mystics and the Sufi mystics. So every religion has a particular slant towards yoga, one or two of them. And by combining all of them in one's individual life, society being an aggregate of individuals, the entire society will harmoniously integrate all the various religions. Religious harmony, therefore, is a byproduct of harmony of the four yogas. This is a remarkable insight of Swami Vivekananda, irrespective of nationality, religion, culture, gender, and so on. In the modern age, Swami Vivekananda made this ideal for all. The wonderful artistic emblem that he created for the Ramakrishna Mutt and the Ramakrishna Mission is his greatest gift to humanity. The beginning of this webinar, you will see on the screen, we'll again display this, the emblem. In which Swami Vivekananda says, he himself drew this emblem. Great Rishi that he was, in his so all of you can see this emblem. It's a beautiful artistic picture. It was not drawn by him in a sense. It arose in his pure mind of this modern Rishi, Swami Vivekananda, in a stroke of artistic genius, as it were, spiritual genius. He says, the wavy waters in the picture are symbolic of karma. The lotus is symbolic of bhakti. The rising sun symbolizes jnana, while the encircling serpent is indicative of yoga, the kundalini shakti, and the swan in the picture, the hamsa, is the paramatman. So the meaning of this picture is, by a combination of jnana, bhakti, karma, and yoga, the vision of the paramatman is obtained. And they put below a wonderful emblem, wonderful saying from the Upanishad, Tanno Hamsa Prachodayat. May that Hamsa, may that supreme swan give us all the inspiration that we need in life. Now, who is inspiring us? Who is motivating us? Our own senses. My tongue says, eat this, and I eat it. My eyes say, see this, and I see it. My ear says, hear this sound, I hear. My skin says, touch this, and feel the pleasurable sensation of touch, and I do it. And Shabda Sparsha Rupa Gandha. And the nose says, you smell this and I smell this. So my senses are now giving me the inspiration to do what I want. Transcend that, go beyond this, purify this, sublimate this. Your inspiration shall not be the senses, it shall be the hamsa. Let us all pray. Tanno hamsa prachodaya. This is the vakya, the statement from the Mahanarayana Upanishad, the Hamsa Gayatri as it is called, and this is given to sannyasins at the time of renunciation, taking the vows of sannyasa by the Guru, and Swami Vivekananda, the great Jagat Guru of the whole universe, has given this Maha Mantra Tanno Hamsa Prachodayat, for the whole universe to take by a combination of Jnana, Bhakti, Karma, and Yoga. May the Supreme Swan, the Paramahamsa, be realized in the hearts of everybody. May that Supreme Swan, Hamsa, be our eternal inspiration. Tanno Hamsa Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.